Hello and welcome to Nature Source Care. My name is Dr. Funda Goldman. I'm a licensed naturopathic physician, and today's talk I was going to cover skin brushing or Ayurvedic Garshana, the benefits and considerations. So let's get started. So please note, as always, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. For any symptoms that persist or worsen, please consult with a qualified medical professional. It is always best to determine the root cause of any disease and to develop a comprehensive treatment plan. And while natural remedies can be very effective, they may not be appropriate for everyone or as a single therapy, so please keep that in mind. So let's just talk about skin brushing generally and why you might be interested in it. So what is it, first of all? Well, it's a self-care technique used for cleansing and rebalancing both the body and the mind, and I'll get into a specific technique in the following slides. But it is actually attributed to Ayurveda, or traditional Indian medicine, and in that paradigm of medicine, it's called Garshana in Sanskrit. So what are the benefits of this technique? Well, self-care and healing rituals generally, I find, especially in today's day and age, most people are running around, super busy, and they don't even really take like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to take care of themselves in very basic ways. So any sort of self-care, I think, is a good idea these days. And typically skin brushing feels good, so that's kind of a nice thing. More physiological effects that it has: it improves circulation, like cardiac circulation, blood flow, also lymphatic flow and drainage. And so because it helps the circulation of blood and lymphatic fluid, it can actually help to decrease edema or swelling, depending on what's causing the edema or swelling. You have to keep that in mind. It can also help with relaxation and stress reduction, especially if there is muscle tension. And it helps because it's a physical therapy and you're focusing on your hand or your leg or something like that, it actually helps you to get out of your head if you happen to be thinking a lot. Like one time I recommended this to a friend who was going through a very stressful time taking care of a older parent who was sick, and she really found it helpful. Again, not so much for the physical effects, although that was nice and she appreciated that, but just, mentally and sort of for all the stress she was going through, it was really helpful for her in that regard. It helps stimulate the nervous system. And so because of that, especially if you're feeling a little bit sluggish, a little bit tired, a little droopy, that sort of thing, it can actually kind of give you a little bit of energy pretty quickly. And because of that, help also with mental energy, focus, clarity, that sort of thing. Because this does move fluid through the body, it actually helps to detoxify, because a lot of toxins are not just stored, especially not just like in the liver or the kidneys, which are considered the main detoxing organs, but the skin is the largest organ of the body, and the skin is a major detoxifying organ also through sweating and things like that. And because there's a subcutaneous layer of fat, it can actually hold especially fat-soluble toxins. And fat-soluble toxins are typically things from like my patients who are involved with as auto mechanics or something like that, or manufacturing. A lot of the solvents and paints and oils and things that different sort of product manufacturing uses, those sorts of things tend to be fat soluble. And so the fat soluble toxins, they tend to store in fatty areas of the body, because what the body's trying to do is trying to save your brain and nervous system, really important central organs, because the brain and nervous system is about 90% fat. So it's actually, you're better off if you have a little love handle, or if there's a little extra cushion in the skin or something like that, to store the toxins there, because it's less likely to affect vital functioning of the body. Okay, so it can also decrease pain, again, depending on what the pain is and what it's being caused by, but especially if there's inflammation in the body. And because of toxic buildup that can cause pain, it can help to relieve pain like that. Skin brushing does tend to improve tissue tone, not just the skin, but the muscles and the ligaments and tendons that are kind of, surrounded by fluid, lymphatic fluid, blood. And there can be cellular, again, edema or swelling, so there might be extra fluid. And so it can potentially improve tissue tone. And as part of that, it may help cellulite to some degree. Now, cellulite is a complicated issue that involves typically a change in diet, potentially also salt intake. So I would also look at, if you're interested in this for cellulite specifically, I would look at my videos on Kapha diet, which is an Ayurvedic diet for earth type people, and also my video on doing a salt inventory, because too much salt in the diet will increase fluid retention. And the thing is, even my patients who have high blood pressure and they come in on several medications for high blood pressure and they tell me, oh, I'm watching my salt, very few of my patients have actually ever counted the number of milligrams of salt that they're taking in. And when they do, they're actually usually flabbergasted by how much salt they're taking in. I mean, we're talking thousands of milligrams a day when you don't need more than, a few hundred. So it's there's a lot of salt in people's food that they're not aware of. And so doing a salt inventory for a week is a really helpful thing for various reasons, not just high blood pressure, but if you have kidney disease, or if you have a high risk of stroke because of maybe family history, or you have, cellular swelling, it can be helpful for many reasons besides cellulite. So skin brushing, it also helps to exfoliate the skin. It helps to unclog pores. And because of this, it improves the ability to sweat. So it improves the detoxifying properties of the skin. And it also makes the skin softer typically. And skin brushing can be an alternative to Abhyanga. Abhyanga is warm oil massage from Ayurveda. Warm oil massage is not appropriate in all circumstances, especially if you happen to be a Kapha or earth person. All that oil is not necessarily balancing for your constitution type. And all that oil, if you happen to be a Pitta or fire person with a lot of inflammation, especially in summertime, Abhyanga may not be a good idea. And so you might try some light skin brushing instead, especially for Kapha people, because skin brushing is light and dry, and Kapha is heavy and wet. The light and dry properties of skin brushing help to balance the heavy and wet properties of Kapha. And Pitta people, they tend to be oily and hot. So light skin brushing that's not too intense or too irritating to the skin can be helpful. I tend to I have Vata Pitta skin myself. My skin gets very inflamed in the summer. I have to protect it quite a bit. And so in the summer, Abhyanga is really kind of uncomfortable, all that oil, because oils tend to inflame Pitta or fire. And so I much prefer skin brushing, especially in the summertime. Contraindication, so instability of the body or the mind. So if somebody's not in a stable place, this is not a good idea because skin brushing tends to be stimulating. If somebody happens to be an extreme Vata or wind type of person, so a lot of dryness and sensitivity, this is not a good idea because this is a therapy that tends to increase that if somebody's in a very extreme state. So other contraindications: open wounds, sores, cuts on the skin, not a good idea. We don't want to bother that. Infectious disease of the skin, so things like scabies or something like that, not a good idea. Dry, inflamed, irritated skin. If the skin is already angry looking, this is not a good idea to do skin brushing. If there's bleeding in the skin, that's sort of an open cut or wound, that's not a good idea. Contact dermatitis like poison ivy, the skin is already irritated, and this is going to irritate it more if you have something like poison ivy. Recent surgery, so if the surgery wounds have not healed appropriately, or if somebody's gone through radiation and the skin is irritated from radiation, this is not a good idea. Sunburns, definitely not a good idea. Cellulitis, if the skin is and tissue is so inflamed and so swollen, this is not particularly a good idea. You probably wouldn't want to use tools and things like this. It might be too irritating for skin, especially if it's about to burst or split or something like that, not a good idea. Skin cancer, also not a good idea. Also, is somebody severely constipated. So why is that on this list? Well, the thing is that the thing with skin brushing is you're increasing circulation and you're moving toxins potentially out of the peripheral tissues. But if you're not going to the bathroom, and having a bowel movement, then those toxins are just going to circulate in their body. They're not going to leave your body. So you may temporarily actually feel worse because the toxins that were stored in some subcompartment of your subcutaneous tissue in your skin are now freely circulating and making you feel sick. So you do want to make sure that you're going to the bathroom properly, hopefully once a day to do this therapy. All right, so let's talk about skin brushing tools. There are plenty out there to choose from. Usually when you see, I think most of the articles and things I've seen about skin brushing, usually you'll see these first two tools here. One is kind of a handheld bristle brush, that you can it has a band you can put over the back of your hand and kind of scrub away. And then you have the back brush here with the long handle so you can get your back, mid-back and stuff, which is usually hard to reach for most people. These two, if you get these two, I would definitely recommend touch the bristles and push down on them and make sure that there's some give and there's some softness. Because some of these brushes, they're so harsh. Like, I mean, they would just rip my skin apart. I would never use them or recommend them to other people. And this is, as we talk about these different tools, these are the hardest ones. So if you do have sensitive or, you do tend to get inflamed skin, but you're not currently inflamed, these might be too much. Okay, I don't tend to use them. I have used them in the past and they were too much for my skin, so I don't tend to use them. You have in the middle here, I have an example of what are called exfoliating gloves. So these gloves, they're nice because they do have some texture, not as much as these brushes on the left here. So these tend to work pretty well. And these tools, like sometimes I hear from people, well, why do I need a brush? Can't I just use a washcloth? Well, if these tools are too much for your sensitive skin, then by all means use a washcloth. But the thing is that washcloth usually doesn't have enough texture to really get into the tissues to move things around. Like the first time, I thought that myself before I actually did skin brushing with some kind of brush or something with a little more texture, a little more that creates a little bit more friction. I just use a washcloth. But the thing is that washcloth typically will slide over your skin and it doesn't create enough friction. Not that it has to be harsh and, rip open your skin. You don't want anything, harsh like that. But I remember when I did the skin brushing the first time, I was shocked at how much better I felt. And, I was surprised that that little bit of difference of texture really did make a difference in terms of how I felt immediately. And then the effects I saw on my body and that sort of thing. So exfoliating gloves are pretty good. These are what I generally use myself. This pair here happens to be by Eco Tools, and I'm not mentioning them because they pay me to. I have no commercial relationship with Eco Tools, but people do ask me for specific products because there's so many out there and they don't know which ones work well. So that's the only reason why I'm, suggesting this specific brand. I'm sure there are other great brands, but this is the brand that I know. Exfoliating gloves is a possibility. The nice thing about the gloves too is that you can get in I think into little spaces around your fingers and your toes, inside and stuff like that, because they're more malleable and you can get into small spaces and I think really kind of work tissue a little bit. I think better. I like it. I tend to like it better than the brushes, like I mentioned, but also because the brushes are just way too harsh for my skin. Then we have here a shower mitt. So this is sort of like a step above a washcloth. There's more texture to it, but it's a step down. It's smoother than the exfoliating gloves. So if you find exfoliating gloves too harsh for your skin or irritating for your skin, you might try a shower mitt because it is a little bit more texture and creates a little bit more friction than a washcloth. This one is also by Eco Tools. It works, very well. For me, I need a little bit more friction in the shower mitt, so the exfoliating gloves is a pretty good fit for me, but everybody's got different, things that they're dealing with. And if the shower mitt's too much for you, then washcloth. And for some people, even a washcloth is too much. So, again, I just wanted to introduce different tools that you might consider to find your best, option. So let's talk about the actual technique. So the technique typically takes like 5 to 10 minutes to do in a session. And this can be done daily unless, again, you are a highly sensitive, especially high vata person. This might be too stimulating day in and day out if you're overstimulated already. And it's best to do this before your bath or shower on dry skin. I typically recommend to do this in the morning or afternoon, not really before bedtime, because it can be stimulating. So if you're sensitive, it may affect your sleep. Although for some people, they like to do this because it relaxes them and gets rid of muscle tension, because if they're doing it gently, it's almost like a massage. So, again, I usually recommend it earlier in the day, but, you can see for yourself, see how you feel about it, how it works for you. So what you do is you start with 1 foot, 1 hand, and then you just do short little strokes, like maybe a few inches at a time, a couple inches at a time. So you can just do, straight up and down, or you can do like little circles. So again, the little circles would be about 1 inch or 2 in diameter. So not long strokes, because with the shorter strokes, I feel like you get in there and get into the tissues a little bit better. But the thing is, what you want to do is you want to start from the periphery. So you want to start at like the fingertips or the toe tips, and you want to move to the center of the body. So you want to move from the fingers or toes towards the heart. Every time you're brushing, you want to brush towards the heart. You don't want to brush away, you want to brush towards the heart. So you want to work up each limb towards the heart, and then the lower torso, like the hips and the belly towards the heart, and then the chest and upper back, you want to move down towards the heart. So again, always towards the middle, always towards the heart. The reason why is there's a big lymphatic duct behind the heart where all the lymphatic fluid drains out. So that's helpful to, again, get these toxins and the fluid up and out. I tend to tell people to avoid their neck, face, and scalp because the skin is too fragile there. And there's plenty of good that happens just from doing from the neck down. And while you're doing this, I also tell people to think about this, not so much as skin brushing, because brushing kind of has this connotation of scrubbing. And I don't want people to think about scrubbing, because then they just sort of scrub their skin like they're trying to, exfoliate. It's more than that, it's deeper. So I tell people, like, when you're doing the skin brushing, you want to think about moving the fluid under the skin, up and out. Almost like a massage. You're using this brush or this exfoliating glove or whatever tool you're using to move the fluid up and out. Okay, rather than just scrub and scratch up your skin. So what may happen is a side effect, especially if you've never done any kind of cleansing, and depending also on what sort of toxins you might have in your body. If you're more toxic and don't realize it, you may feel this more than other people, but the first few days you might feel a little bit achy or fluish, like a little bit of muscle pain or joint pain, that sort of thing. It shouldn't be much, but it is potentially a sign that the toxins are moving up and out. So the toxins that were stored in like the subcutaneous layer of fat in the skin are now getting moved out, and they're circulating through the system. So you're feeling it. But again, it should relieve itself within about 2 to 4 days. Yeah. I remember, again, the first time I did this, I was surprised. I don't have any sort of arthritis, or I never have. And the first 2 or 3 days, I remember like walking up the stairs and like feeling it in my knees, and I was like, what is that? So, but then after 2 or 3 days, it went away. Okay, so again, toxins up and out. Other things that may happen, you might get minor skin breakouts. So like maybe you're an adult and you get a few little, acne spots or something like that. Again, that's the toxins up and out. They're moving out of the subcutaneous layer of skin and circulating through the blood. And so some of that might come out on the skin elsewhere before it goes up and out. Some people might get a little bit of brain fog because, again, the toxins, they can affect your mind, cognitive function. You might also see more mucus in your stool. I think I remember this the first time I did it. The first 2 or 3 days, I had quite a bit of mucus in the stool because, again, it's just, if you're not circulating your fluids well, most of us are sitting around most of the time these days, sitting behind a computer. So your body's not moving as much as we used to 100 years ago when most of us were farmers, working with our bodies day in and day out. So things tend to stagnate. So you might see the first few days like more mucus in your stool, but again, that should also clear up once you're, a little bit into this, a few days into this, and it can help to drink some water to support drainage and stuff like that. Okay, so again, these symptoms here should be mild, should resolve within 2 to 4 days. If they do not resolve in a few days, or if they get worse, I would suggest seeking medical support because, for example, you might have more toxicity in your body than you're aware of, and some additional support options like herbal medicine or nutritional support may be helpful to help with detoxifying. So there you go. Skin brushing, great tool. I do it every day myself. I love it. And even my patients, like when I design cleanses for people, I often will include either Abhyanga or skin brushing Garshana. And even though the cleanses I typically design are about 2 weeks long, people love this. They feel so good on it. Like they keep doing it, even after their official 2 weeks cleanse is over. Like they'll do it a couple times a week. Some people will do it every day. So, it's enjoyable. It's a nice thing to know about and do, as long as it works for you and your skin can handle it. So thank you for your time as always. I do have another YouTube channel on Vedic Astrology. So if you're interested in more of the Vedic arts, you might be interested in that. It's called Light Vedic Astrology. You can check it out if you're interested. But otherwise, I hope you're taking good care of yourself. And until the next one, take care. Bye-bye.